It's a Sunday morning and I thought that I might get up early and miss the traffic. I'm hoping it'll be a little bit quieter and we can have a little chat. I'm normally at work on a Sunday morning. It's a rare treat to be here. I've talked before about my work, and it's with a faith community. It's usually part of my role to be at worship on a Sunday morning. But yesterday there was a community big lunch, and somebody needed to be there to represent the organisation, and I was asked, and I absolutely loved it. It was in a community garden, and there was live music. There were people of all different ages with their Zimmer frames and their mobility scooters, and children blowing the big bubbles and chalking on the floor, and it was just really lovely. All ages in between. There was a really good band on that was playing lots of folk and Irish music and Johnny Cash and all that kind of stuff. It was just really, really nice, and it was beautiful weather, blue skies. We had such a lovely time, and a bit of line dancing as well. The reason I say that is because it was a togetherness that felt so good, and there's something... It's good for the soul to experience community, people that you don't know, that are otherwise strangers to you, just coming together and sharing a meal. Everyone brought some food and we all shared the food. And the whole idea is to build community, because that support is really valuable to us all. And what else was happening yesterday, of course, is lots of people were coming together in different places all over the USA. I think there were 2,100 protest marches that had been organised, and as far as I know, it haven't heard any different. They were peaceful. I'm wearing my my dove peace ring for that peaceful energy that is all grounded in love. And I just want to talk about that a little bit this morning, because I was thinking about language that we use. My last video was about language and how we can use different language, but essentially we're saying the same thing, and it doesn't really matter the type of language that we use. And one of the things that I noticed yesterday as I was watching some of the speeches that were being given is there was one person, I forget who it was a man. You might be able to tell me if you recognise what I'm saying. He was talking about people coming together, and he was saying, make a friend today. You know, talking to crowds of thousands, but saying, make a friend, speak to people, get to know your neighbours, in other words, and think about them tomorrow and build on that and keep making these connections. He talked about do this today and then do that tomorrow. The emphasis being that we are, as people, we need each other, and we're strong together, and we're all just the same underneath. And it was interesting that he used the word love. It really struck me that he said we love each other. And he was, urging people to love one another. Now, how strange to hear that in what you might think is a political arena. This is not a church platform. This is politics. It's people action against what they don't like seeing unfolding by the government, the current administration, and its policies. And in particular, it's identifying that it's about values. It's the values that we are rejecting in place of this value. Because this is not about politics. People have said to me before, leave politics out of it when you're doing your videos. This is about life. This is about the things that are really important to us, how we're doing life and how we're living our best lives as human beings. And really, human being is the key. Because you'll remember I've said recently about how Bonhoeffer's theology has become meaningful to me. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talked about in Jesus we had God becoming humanity, not becoming a human being so that it's separate to us. That's always how I've been taught it, and probably how you think of it too. But becoming humanity. And for me, that was a real eye-opener, because it was saying that when we are being a human being, then that is Christ. That is what it is to be Christian. It's to be a whole human being, to have a heart of flesh rather than a heart of stone. And so Jesus of Nazareth epitomized that, the perfect human being, meaning the whole human being, teleos, whole. You must be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. So the divine human is the Christ, and the Christ is what is birthed in us if we come home to who we truly are, a human being. And this was the call yesterday that I heard again and again. It was one that lifts the spirit, and people were saying, yes, we want this, yes, we want this. It's almost as though things have to become so bad. You know, you could see it as this all playing out as being a necessary evil. And even the protagonists that are playing these roles unconsciously are serving a purpose of getting people to that point where they come together, and the tipping point into the next stage of human evolution, the next paradigm can happen. Because people are saying togetherness and looking out for each other is important for me. When you hurt, I hurt. And it's really starting to understand this thing about this unity consciousness. One of the funniest comments I saw was people said, it must be bad because the introverts are out on the streets protesting. The language of the old paradigm just doesn't have any meaning anymore. This is another thing that I became aware of. I didn't hear people talking about left and right. Those who are invested in the old system will still try to use that because it's a way of dividing and rule. The powers in this world that want to divide and rule will still try to push that narrative. And but it was funny because somebody pointed out to me, and it never really occurred to me before, that when you talk about left and right in politics, you're assuming a central point. You're assuming that the fulcrum is central. And so really simplistically, what you tend to have is a left-leaning politics or policies is the idea of shared resources, the resources being used for the good of the community and the individual serving the community more, and the collective, and that's administrated centrally by a government. And the right being more about individual, privatised wealth and opportunity, you know, individual self-determination, freedom of movement, ironically. I say ironically because some of you know that if you're in America, you've been told don't leave the country right now. There are people in the UK, people I know who have relatives in America, and they're quite worried. They're worried they won't get to see them because they can't visit. They're cancelling visits because they don't know if they get back into the country. So this slide into authoritarianism has taken the fulcrum so far over to the right. Well, it isn't, the fulcrum's still there, but the what's been normalised is so far over there at the extreme that even if your politics are here, centre right, then you're going to be a lefty in comparison. So they'll call you a lefty, or they'll try to. Whereas you say, that's not descriptive of me. I'm a Republican. I'm red. That's what I would have been or always thought of myself. And yesterday I said, it's red and blue together. This was a whole group of people who just came together because they said, no, we don't want that. And it was their belief in democracy and the Constitution and what it was founded on that they were finding common ground in and saying, well, this needs to be defended. What's interesting is the language of freedom and the language of love, the language of community. And I couldn't help thinking there's almost like a kind of religious, spiritual message there. But where were the churches? What are the churches saying? We've talked before about the churches a lot of the time are saying, they're just preaching a false gospel of abundance and the greed cult. Really, that's what it's become for a lot of people. That's why they're deconstructing, that's why they're leaving. And what you actually find is people are calling themselves atheists, and what they're doing is they're coming home to being human. They're just saying, I'm not believing anything else other than just want to be a good person and enjoy being with other people. There's one guy that I follow, I forget his full name, it's called Tim something. He's got shaggy long hair to here, and he's got loads of tattoos. And he's an ex-evangelical preacher rather. He's an ex-evangelical preacher, charismatic, full on. It was his whole life, that was his job. For 30 years, I think. And then he deconstructed, and he'll even show a picture of himself, preaching how different he looked then in his suit and his short hair and everything, Bible bashing. But he's now completely different, but just looks so happy. And yeah, he calls himself an atheist. And as I'm listening to him, I'm thinking, you are not an atheist. But if you want to call yourself, because you need to call yourself an atheist, fine. But what you're doing is you're being a human being. He even says his politics are changing, because he was brought up to be a climate change denier, all of that kind of thing, to be a creationist, to not believe in evolution. And he's having to just relearn. It's a whole shift in his understanding, but he's just discovering what's a different worldview that makes a lot more sense to him, that is people-centered. And what does people-centered mean? It means the human being. So it means the Christ, the incarnation. Christianity has incarnation at its centre, at its heart. If you want to know what God's like, look at Jesus. And Jesus was the whole human being. And all we're doing, if we're following Jesus, and if we want to call ourselves a Christian, is coming home to the true essence of who we are, which is the divine human, a human being made in the image of God. Being, that word being at the heart of it. And I'm just going to read from, I'm not reading from here, you're thinking I was going to go to the Bible, I'm going to come back to that in a moment. From this book, The Heart of Prayer by Rupert Spira. And Rupert Spira, as many of you will know, is a teacher of Advaita, which means non-duality. And that's why I was interested that this book is called The Heart of Prayer, because how does a non-dualist pray? If you're saying, I don't dialogue with the other, whether that's another being or another person. Well, this is this opening page, and I'm just going to read a few words to you. What is God? I am, before the words I am. I always do this going behind and before. So we have I am as a statement of being, of existence. What came behind the words I am? He says here, I would like to remain silent here, but the written word does not permit. It couldn't be much of a book if he did remain silent, but there's nothing to say. In other words, I am. He says, I am is God's confession in our hearts. Abiding as I am is what God is. Abiding as I am is what a person does. And there we have it. Abiding as I am is what God is. Abiding as I am is what a person does. So it's being, just being. And what kind of being are we? We are human beings. We are human being. And so that's the closest we get to God. And what I saw yesterday was people being truly human, rejecting inhumanity, rejecting cruelty. How many times did you hear the word cruelty? This is how the language is changing. We're rejecting cruelty and we're choosing love. We're choosing compassion. This is the message of Jesus. This is the teaching of Jesus. And it's what you would expect to be taught and preached in church. And all too often we're not finding that being taught. Where the Christians aren't stepping up, where they're not fulfilling that duty to preach the message of Jesus, then there's a void. And who's going to step into the void? The people are. The people are. You've heard people saying it gives you faith in humanity. Yes, put your faith in humanity, because you're really putting your faith in Christ. Because Christ is God as humanity. I'm reminded of this story Jesus told. And it was when he was going to have a meal with some... it was at a Pharisee's house. He was going to have a meal, and he told... that they're all having taking their places at the table, and he notices that some people are at the wedding, and he says, when you're invited by someone to a wedding, do not sit down at the place of honour, in case someone who is more distinguished than you has to ask you to get out of that place, and that's my seat. Instead, take the lowest place, and then you might be invited to sit higher up than you thought. So in other words, he's talking about humility. And it's in the same context of that he goes on to tell another story, and this is the one that I was really interested in. One of the dinner guests, on hearing this, said to him, "Blessed is the one who will eat in the kingdom of God." And Jesus said to him, "Someone gave a great dinner and invited many." This is a story he went on to say. "At the time for the dinner, he sent his slave to say to those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is ready now.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, 'I've bought a piece of land and I must go and see it. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have bought the yoke of oxen and I'm going to try them out, to tend to his animals. Please accept my regrets.' Another said, 'I have just been married and therefore I cannot come,' obviously busy with his wife. So the slave returned and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and said to his slave, 'Go out at once into the streets and lanes of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled and the blind and the lame.' And the slave said, 'Sir, what you have ordered has been done, and there is still room.' All right, so the ones that were favoured didn't come, so he just went out into the streets and invited the people who would never be invited to that sort of banquet. But there was still room, so he says, 'Go out into the roads and lanes and compel people to come in. Urge anyone and everyone to come in, so that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those who were invited will taste my dinner.'" Who were the ones that were invited? The ones who were in the tribe. The ones who were in the faith. This just speaks to me about the church. The ones who you would see as the family, the ones who have the message to share with the world. Okay, they've been called out of the world to be salt and light to the world. But if they fail in that, then what else is there to be done than to say, well, look, all the feast, the banquet, the lavish abundance of love, the depth of love is there for everyone, anyone and everyone. Then bring them all in. Bring the ones in that would never get anywhere near that banqueting table in the worldly way of things, the worldly ranking order. Everything turned on its head, and that's what we saw yesterday. We saw people saying, "This is my brother and sister." It doesn't matter what your economic background, it doesn't matter what your political leaning, it doesn't matter what what neighbourhood you live in. It doesn't matter what colour your skin is. We are family. You are my brothers and sisters. We are a human family because of our human beingness. That's the in Christ that Paul speaks of, the in Christness. No longer Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave nor free. Some of them want to take us back to the slave and the masters, back to slavery. But yesterday felt like that Spartacus moment. I'm Spartacus. We're all free, or none of us are free. We're not going back. One other thing I did want to say that I forgot to mention was that the Pope gave a speech yesterday, didn't he? Addressed the USA in Chicago, and his message was centering all about coming home to the heart, hearing God speaking in your heart, and also about loving one another, being in communities, building communities. It's really good that message was timed at the same time as all this other stuff was happening. But you know what I said earlier about this revelation to me about Jesus about Christ being the human being, the incarnation, being God becoming humanity. So a human being is really Christ. And if we're a Christian, we are being truly human as a whole human being, not a human being that's at war with itself, not a human being who's in conflict inwardly. You know, you have to heal inwardly and think, why am I fractured, fragmented, and having to hate? If you're having to hate, it's a projection of what is it in me that's not healed. And people who are cruel are people who are treated cruelly, or who haven't known love, haven't known what it's like to be loved. So they're just normalising. It's a desensitizing themselves to other human beings and the suffering of other human beings. This is a dysfunctional way to be. This is not being truly human. And so the healing for humanity is to come home to the message of oneness that Jesus taught. And I really think that you can find this in the songs, the Christian songs. I mentioned that I should have been at church this morning because that would be my job to be there, and so I get used to hearing these songs. And what's happening for me as part of this reconstruction journey, it's so interesting. I never thought this would happen, but it's because I'm being among Christians. I'm being among good people who are genuinely wanting to explore and discover Jesus, and I'm learning not to think that's not me anymore. I don't believe that. I talked about this in my last video. But this experiencing community has been so enriching for me. And listening to some of the songs and how you can access them at different layers. So there's one song that came to mind when I was looking at all of those crowds yesterday, and all of the people, tens of thousands of people. I think, was it between about 8 million people out on the streets? Certainly there was 2010 arranged protests, marches, gatherings across the USA. That's a huge amount for the No Kings protest. And what came to my mind was the song Let There Be Love shared among us. Peaceful protests, people talking about love. Let there be love shared among us. Let there be love in our eyes. When you look at another person and you just know they are not the other, they're another, they are human being. I'm just looking back into my own soul. And also love in our eyes in the sense of how I perceive, how I see the world, the situation. Let your love sweep this nation. Cause us, O Lord, to arise. Who is Lord? Is it someone out there? Is it a being out there, a deity? No, because where is the deity? The deity is the human being. So we're really reminding ourselves of the human being that we are, who we are in our true essence. cause us, O Lord, O the real me, to arise. Give us a fresh understanding of brotherly love that is real. Let there be love shared among us. Let there be love. Anyway, I hope that spoke to you today, and let me know in the comments if you resonated with anything that was said, if you have any questions, because I'm never quite sure if I explain. I get these thoughts and I want to share them, and I'm never quite sure if I communicate it well and get my meaning across. But yeah, have a good day. Take care. Bye for now. God bless. Thanks for watching.